Welcome to The Promised Land, a show about Manchester United and part of the 90 Min Podcast Network. I'm Scott Saunders, joined by Rob Blanchette, and hello to you, Rob. Hello to you, listener or viewer on YouTube. Rob, what's new?
What's new? Ready for the Premier League again, Scott? I know we hinted at it the other day, but back to normal business now this week, and obviously a big trip to Everton. Everton, who are in turmoil and in dire need of an injection of something positive. Let's hope it's not at the expense of us.
Can you confidently say it won't be?
No, of course I can't. Of course I can't. It's like the script's written, isn't it? Man United turn up at Goodison Park. Goodison Park will be rocking. And they'll be trying to make us the victims, won't they, on the day of them trying to push through and show that they're going to avoid relegation. They've had this huge 10-point deduction, and let's take it out on Manchester United. So it'll be a very interesting Northwest derby, Scott.
But Rob, Erik ten Hag has spent £500 million, and therefore Manchester United should wipe Everton just completely off the pitch. They should beat them 4-0.
Wouldn't
That's how football works.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great if that's how football works? Like, if that is how football worked, then Man United would have beaten everyone over the last 10 years because they've spent 1.6 billion on footballers. So we know that's not how it works. And quite often the narrative or the storyline of what's happening in that week can have a huge effect on a football match. And unfortunately, we're turning up at Everton when they are very much licking their wounds. Like, the Everton fans are not happy. The players are not happy. They're going to try and go out and prove a point.
We'll talk about Everton towards the end of the show. Brief touch on it there, but we'll talk about some stories that are in the news because it is an international week, and therefore you get stuff that drives clicks in newspapers, drives sales of newspapers and clicks on websites and retweets or reposts on your Twitter app or X or whatever it is nowadays. You can follow us on there, by the way, at @Scott Saunders, at @Rob_B, and at Promisant MU as well. Also get us on IG, TikTok, YouTube, etc. And subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts as well. Watch us on YouTube, The Promisant, a Manchester United podcast. Like the video, leave a comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell as well so you never miss a show, usually running Tuesdays and Fridays. Today, as we say, we'll talk about some stuff that is in the news. Manchester United will be banned from the Champions League if Nice and Manchester United qualify because Sir Jim Ratcliffe controls everything, apparently. Erik ten Hag has fallen out with another player because he has a divine right to start every single match that Man United play, even though he's injured 20 games a season. Man United might lose another player to international duty at AFCON, meaning that Andre Onana, Sofiane Amrabat, and possibly Aaron Wan-Bissaka, if he accepts his call-up for Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, he could be out for up to probably 8 games. I don't know how long it is exactly. Some positive news. Luke Shaw is back in training, so we'll talk about where he could play if he starts. Will he go in at left centre-back or at left-back to help out Marcus Rashford, who scored 1 goal all season? And we will also talk about the Everton game on the whole. So, Rob, where do you want to start?
I don't know, Scott. Like, again, I think our audience can hear how impassioned you are about all of those subjects of what's going on around our football club this week. That's why I'm laughing away after you reading out every one of them from today's agenda for the show. But let's go with wherever you want to go, Scott. You pick number one and let's roll with it.
Yeah, I don't know if you can tell by my tone, but having
Scott.
Yeah, just a little peek for you guys. Been working for a football media publisher, a global football media publisher for 7 years. I ran that publisher, or the site, English edition of it, for about 5 of those years. And international breaks are a bit of a dead zone for traffic. I'll just say that, right? So you have to get a little bit creative. You have to bring things up that will cause the stir the pot, that will get people to click on your website, to drive traffic numbers, increase revenue due to adverts on pages, etc. And now X is monetized as well. So, if you tweet something that means that Man United could be banned from the Champions League if they and Nice qualify for it, that's a good story. It drives enragement. It drives, oh my God, what is happening here? And let's talk about this, Rob. Will Man United be banned from the Champions League if they and Nice both qualify for it? Nice, I believe, they're second in Ligue 1. So I think the story as it goes is that whoever finishes higher will get the place, because Sir Jim Ratcliffe controls everything, apparently, even though it's been a year and we haven't had anything announced yet. Even though Man City own Girona, who are also in the top places in the Spanish league. I believe they're first. Yeah. So currently, what happens there if Man City and Girona finish first? Why didn't we see Girona and Man City? Why didn't we see this reported when Girona went top of the league a few weeks ago? I wonder. Because it's not as big a story as it is with Man United. I think that's what it is, Rob.
Whack Man United on it, and it sells, doesn't it? And we've tried to talk about that again in the
past. Especially if it's negative. But believe me, there's some publishers out there that do that absolutely brilliantly, and people keep falling for it over and over and over and over again.
And also, Scott, like, ironically, it's not actually for Man United fans. It's actually for everyone else. So
who hates Man United?
Yeah, so Man United fans buy into it because it's a talking point. And yeah, like the whole Sir Jim Ratcliffe thing is just running and running. Kind of said last week and the week before that this is not going to finish soon. Everyone's like, oh, announcement today. It's like, well, no, they're still trying to sort stuff out. But then you get these stories, which I've kind of called in the past like rogue stories, in the fact that, as you highlighted beautifully there, City's involvement with Girona. That's fine, Scott. Credit where it's due. City's involvement with Girona and multiple football clubs around the world. Like, they do own lots of football clubs. I think Sir Jim Ratcliffe owns 1, 2, or 3, has involvement across Europe and across the world. But you're right. It's because it's Man United. And that's interesting to everyone who doesn't support Man United as well. That's the only club that you could say this about that would get hits and clicks for. Yes, that's part of our industry. But that's why I've not really commented on this story on Twitter, because it's hot air. It's a lot of hot air. And do you think that when people are buying football clubs, they don't look into this kind of stuff, or they don't ask?
So Jim Ratcliffe, one of Britain's second richest man, who wants to eventually take over Man United, has not thought about this. So Jim Ratcliffe, who will, when he owns his stake, or when he buys his stake, whenever it's confirmed, is going to have to ask Joel Glazer for permission for everything that he does, because that is what successful business people do. They invest all of that money in a football club for no reason. For no control.
Sarcasm is brilliant today. He's on it. He's rocking. He's absolutely rocking. But it's also true, isn't it? What you're saying there is totally right in what you're trying to say. And that is, yes, of course, these things are looked at and before anyone thinks about them. And the reason why the British tabloid press will report on a lot of that stuff is because people that hate Man United want to read it and will click it. And that's just where it is. That's been quite interesting, I think, Scott, in this whole process of Qatar, Jim Ratcliffe, and all this, about what Man United fans kind of want, but also what other football fans want from Man United. And of course, what do they want, Scott? They just want misery, losses, defeats. Our football club has done really well at promoting that side of the business, hasn't it? Over the last 10 years, it's given all these fans that grew up absolutely hating Man United and Man United ruining their childhood. It's given them that kind of little niche now of holding on to about why they hate our football club. It starts through the press. It ends with rival fans. And unfortunately, Man United have been losing games over a long period of time and have not been as successful as we would like. So that's the root of it, Scott, isn't it? Ultimately, is that story about Jim Ratcliffe and Nice and all that. It's probably more interesting to Arsenal and Liverpool fans than it is, say, to you and me.
Yeah, totally. And also, I mean, like, it's difficult, really, because I suppose when you see a story like that, you think, oh God, that actually does make sense, because technically, in UEFA's regulations, if you look into the fine print, it technically does say something along these lines. Yet, I'm sure RB Leipzig and Salzburg who have played in the Champions League against each other, who own they're literally the same brand.
Literally the same team.
One team sells all their good players to the other team
All the time.
or like quite frequently.
Yeah.
And yet,
they're both literally called Red Bull.
and they have other clubs as part of that umbrella as well. I'm just thinking, we dug into this story ourselves, and it's not a big concern, really.
No.
I'm sure that United will, if Salzburg and Leipzig can find a way, I'm sure that United and Sir Jim Ratcliffe will be able to find a way. I mean, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Who says United are even going to qualify for the Champions League anyway? You might not have to worry about it.
Might come 7th. Like, who knows? I tell you, let's do one more comparison just on the back of that. It's a little bit like, say, Todibo at Nice and people saying, "Oh, well, that's a bit underhand, isn't it?" Like if Todibo went to Man United and like he's played for Nice and then he goes to a Jim Ratcliffe club in England, that's awful, isn't it? And yet we've literally just spent the whole week talking about Saudi Arabian footballers from the Pro League now being able to come to the Premier League because the Premier League voted it in. So it's like,
well, they didn't even vote it in, Rob. They just voted to keep it in. Like
they just voted to kind of turn a blind eye. That's kind of how I described it last week.
Notice how the clubs like Manchester City and Newcastle voted in favour of.
Funny that.
Yeah, it's incredibly funny when Ruben Neves turns up at Newcastle because Sandro Tonali is banned for the rest of the season on January 7th or something like that on a free loan. Wow.
Sheffield United with Saudi Arabian money in their coffers voted for it, even though that they have no real links in terms of players in that ballpark. So it shows you that money talks, ownership talks. And this is why we talk about maybe states owning football clubs as not being a particularly good thing. But yes, that's going to roll and roll now because that's going to get exploited. The fact that, we said Saudi Arabia owning 4 or 5 teams in the Pro League, but the truth is they own all of them. They have money in every club in the Pro League. And that means that every player that gets bought, Scott, is being bought by the Saudi government. And that means that if Saudi own 80% of Newcastle United, guess where those players might be going? So that's just how it works. And unfortunately, I think the Premier League had a chance to do something, but it's a numbers game, isn't it? It's they have enough money in enough Premier League teams for them all to vote the wrong way.
Yeah, just to wrap up this part of the show, it's not Min and our team understand that Ineos don't exactly intend to give up Nice or Lausanne, and they're not that concerned about a conflict here.
No. The Red Bull example is perfect.
There are ways that you can do this. Ineos have already been in contact with UEFA officials and have had assurances that there won't be any major issues. So that big headline that you saw, just keep that in mind next time you see something sensationalized. I mean, sensationalism is what gets all of the clicks nowadays and all the attention. Rob, have we ever partook in sensationalism on this? Or like, it was definitely our intention not to. Maybe sometimes we've fallen into the trap a little bit, but it was definitely our intention not to do that.
There are times when you are trying to devise a thumbnail by committee. That's how we kind of do it, isn't it? And we will talk about things and we will absolutely maybe lean on the news or lean on the story. But we've always been trying to be true to about whatever our content was. So we're not trying to direct you to our content to then tell you a big fat lie or to be able to tell you like, oh, we're saying this in a thumbnail, but we're not actually really saying it. This is kind of what Marcus Rashford was talking about the other day with the fan channel, isn't it? About, just blatant lies to get people to watch stuff. No, I think that does our reputation as like in our workplace damage. So it's difficult for us because we don't want to do that. So we just say that by committee, we're not doing that. That's what we do, isn't it? So there are times we have to talk about stories like we just started off there with the Nice story and the Man United story and the Jim Ratcliffe thing with Champions League. But that's because that's news. So we have to kind of touch on it, but we can kind of say to you, we think it's rubbish. And we've done that all along with the ownership for this last year, haven't we? We've done that with Qatar and with Ratcliffe. try to be completely straight about it and say what we really think about those subjects.
Apologies in advance for the title of this podcast being Man United will be banned from the Champions League for all of listeners.
We won't do that. We'll make that promise now. Like, I'm sure you'll have seen the thumbnail now, by now, whatever it might be, but we'll go with something different.
But we haven't actually decided what it is yet, so I'm going to try and convince
the committee
Rob
has not decided.
I'm going to try and convince Rob that that's what we should be doing for this podcast. Maybe though, maybe we will be titling it Erik ten Hag has fallen out with another first team player.
More
this
likely.
Guy is a nightmare. He doesn't know what he's doing. Get out, manager. The
Nasty
next one,
Eric.
Get out. You're not playing the players that we have promised. They get every single waking minute of football. You're not upholding your end of the bargain. You're falling out with all these players. This time it's Rafa Varane, who, like, Rob, what do you think of this? Because obviously it's been brewing in the background for a few weeks. I mean, we've heard murmurs of this ourselves, and there's probably an entitlement on Varane's case to be like, why is Johnny Evans playing ahead of me?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that to start with. I do have something I'd like to say on it, but what do you make of it? Is there meat on the bone here? And do you think Rafa Varane could be shipped out in 6 weeks, even?
Very much meat on the bone. 100% here. We've heard plenty over a short period of time now. If you're Rafa Varane, and again, you've won everything at Real Madrid, you've won the World Cup, etc., you probably didn't think you were going into this season as your maybe fourth choice centre-back, did you? Like, that's where it is. And if Lisandro Martinez was fit, he might have even been fifth. Or if Luke Shaw was fit, sixth. Like, we'll do a little bit more Luke Shaw later on. I think the thing is with Rafa Varane is that it's not really about his technical ability. Not really. But it's very easy for a manager to just go that route and just say it's about technical ability. Now, I totally understand. We said this before, that looking at the left-sided centre-back, that you have to have someone on the right to match them. Is there a way of making that work? Of course, that's a huge part of the coaching team's objective every week, is to make sure that each game they have that. But if you're Rafa Varane and everyone's injured and Harry Maguire hasn't played, basically since last year, and Victor Lindelof is still being Victor Lindelof, you probably think you're going to play, probably. So there is that. But we do know that it's also that Varane gets injured. Varane hasn't contributed in the way that, say, all of us would want him to. And let's be honest, Scott, brutally, his form himself has not been great. So you can't say that he's been playing brilliantly and therefore he has to start. So, yes, that's the storyline in terms of where we stand at the moment. You said, do I think Rafa Varane could leave? Again, absolutely. I think that maybe that little honeymoon period of the Real Madrid boys is over. I think Casemiro has now looked at it and gone, oh, Premier League's quite fast. Not quite sure I should be doing this. Is there a way out? I think Rafa Varane is thinking, Premier League's quite fast. I'm now getting 2 minutes off the bench in garbage time, trying to close games down. I don't want to do that. There is interest from Bayern Munich, though the interest there is not particularly hot. It's not a huge thing, but we do know.
That was very Twitter, Rob.
It was very Twitter because I noted it, Scott.
Hot, with the quotation finger marks. Yeah.
Hot take, as some of my American colleagues used to say a lot, and it's actually a thing in sport. So that wasn't a hot take because that's been talked about and it is there, but it's not that hot. Like, it's more smouldering away on a fireplace in the background. It's not burning. But I do think we started the show off talking about Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia will have a big part in this because Manchester United will be looking at these two players and thinking, well, they're older, they've got these big wages, we made a bit of a mistake with that. Oh, now how do we rectify it? That's probably the only way. We know that Saudi Arabia want those two players as well as other players at Man United. And I think that could happen sooner rather than later. I really do. Like, I don't think Varane is going to sit for 6 months on the bench if him and the manager have fallen out. It's just not, he's not going to sit there and think at this stage of his career that he just wants to contribute off the bench now and then. Because it does feel like that the manager has maybe turned away from him a little bit. The manager has looked at...
I have Erik ten Hag. We're speaking ahead of his press conference on Friday, where I'm sure he'll say something again to diffuse the situation.
Yeah.
Which won't work really because...
I love Rafa.
Yeah. He said, I think
Top
he did
player.
an interview which was released earlier this week, talking about Maguire and Varane. He said, Maguire took his chance. We were talking about injured players. He took his chance when Rafa Varane was absent. There's internal competition, which is normal in big clubs. When your chance comes, you must seize it, and the others must fight to find their place. He has said publicly that he prefers one of these players in the right centre-back position and another player in the left centre-back position.
Yeah.
I think people see that as an excuse, but I generally think in Ten Hag's mind that is a legit thing. And we'll have a conversation about Luke Shaw in a bit, because I think that he could turn back to Luke Shaw personally at left centre back. You know,
I think he will.
If and when he gets back in the team, he's back in training, obviously. But you know, there's a lot of outrage, obviously, because he's fallen out with Jadon Sancho, and wherever you think about that, any manager who is going to be successful has to have players on his side, and they have to abide by the rules. And how long? And people are like demanding, why isn't Varane playing? Why isn't Varane playing? He's won Champions Leagues. He's on massive money. All this kind of stuff. That is the exact problem that Man United have had for so long. In the fact, and you can say this about everyone. I include Marcus Rashford in this as well. And I call for Marcus Rashford to not start games this season because he's simply not been good enough for me. You know, no player in this team should have a divine right to start a match. Nobody for me. No. Even going back to when Ronaldo was there and we had that debate about him. If you want to have a successful football team, and you're not miles away from that at the moment, you got to have a meritocracy, and it's got to be based on putting the work in. And Harry Maguire is probably the best example at the moment. I'm not saying that Maguire is like the centre-back choice for the next 5 years, but currently, you know, if Ten Hag doesn't think that Maguire and Varane are a good pair, maybe that's just his coaching convictions. Maybe that's the way that he sees things. And to me, I think it sums up United's issue in the fact that you have people demanding that just because Rafa Varane won the Champions League a few years ago, he should be starting every single week now when he's fit.
Yeah.
Because in 2 weeks' time, if he does start every week, he gets injured and he's out for another 6. You know, like, how can you build momentum with that? Ten Hag talks often about having the same. He said this before the international break. I've not been able to play the same back four all season. You know, and he chops and changes because of injuries, this kind of thing. But people will criticize the manager because it's easy to criticize the manager, and that's the simple thing to do. That's the popular point. You know?
Yeah. Totally. There's 2 or 3 points I want to make off the back of that. So one of the things that Ten Hag said very, very recently is about the upscale in physicality in the Premier League this season. And I think he was obviously referring to the injuries, like 14 first team injuries, whatever you want to call it. But I do think that is something that sticks in his mind about when he's now picking teams, is that he does look at maybe his more brittle options and thinks, well, do I rely on, say, Varane every football match when I know that maybe he cannot do it? You think about that. There's been an upscale from last season to this season in Premier League statistics for running, all the combative stuff in the Premier League. You might look at your more fragile options and go, might have to play them a little bit less. Now, Rafa Varane won't like that because Rafa Varane won't want anyone telling him that he's fragile in inverted commas. But that's how managers think, and that's how the coaching team will think. They'll look at the sports science and they'll go, actually, Harry Maguire's trained really, really well behind the scenes. We like the fitness levels. We like what he's been doing. We've seen that there's a technical improvement in some of his stuff. He might just be more suited to what we're doing in this next game than, say, Rafa Varane. Now, most Man United fans will not buy into that at all. I said publicly on Twitter that if Varane is fit, you should play Varane. I kind of stick by that. But I also understand why the manager doesn't think like that. I know, like, I'm saying that as a fan or what I would like to see. I'm not saying that because I've watched them all in training all week long. And that's much, much more important. You just mentioned Ronaldo there. And I was thinking about it just before you said it. I think that's the perfect example, is that before Ten Hag came to Man United, we heard almost very, very quickly from direct sources that he didn't fancy Ronaldo, like before it. Yet he went through the whole charade in his pressers for months of saying Cristiano, one of the greatest players of all time. Everyone would love to work with Cristiano, blah, 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 blah. And Ten Hag does that. He's a really good statesman in those comments. Like, he's never going to burn players. Even with Jadon Sancho, where he's been very, very upset with Jadon Sancho, he's bit his lip, hasn't he? But he's tried to keep it, you know, as quite as low as possible at times. With Cristiano, kind of just gave Cristiano enough rope to hang himself at the end of the day, and that's what happened. He went to he went and did the interview, and that was it. Finished, gone, and he's off to Saudi. I think we're getting there really with Casemiro and with Varane, is that they're not happy, and I think the manager will be saying to them, "So what? This is my football club. I'm the manager. I'm not here to make you happy. You're here to make me happy." And do you know what?
Exactly. But I know.
Okay, that's how it should be.
Like, that's how it should be.
That's how it should be. And that's how, ultimately, when you are a coach, you are the most important person at the football club. And it should always be like that. And that means, Scott, that your neck is on the block. Like, if you don't play Varane and you lose games, guess what? We're going to talk about that, aren't we? We're going to say, Varane sat on the bench. And that's a valid reason to talk about it. But Varane doesn't deserve an automatic starting spot. Like, I don't think at Man United there is one player who is Mohamed Salah. Not one who could say, I have to start every week because I do this all the time. I'm not, Haaland might be able to say that to Pep, but even Pep will be like, I'm resting you this week. You know what I mean? Because it's me. I'm doing what I want to do. So no, I'm with the manager on that. And I don't think the manager's fallen out with Varane. I think Varane doesn't like it. But that's tough,
he shouldn't like it either. Like,
why should he?
Like it?
He shouldn't like it. And do you know what? Harry Maguire didn't like it last year. But Harry Maguire did the right thing, is that he just stuck with it, got on with the training. And we said, funnier things have happened in football. Harry Maguire might be your first choice centre-back till the end of the season. Here we are 2, 3, 4 weeks on from that comment. He might well be your first choice centre-back all the way through to the rest of the season. I don't think that means you build on him, or he's the player that you want to kind of base your football team around at the back. But it does mean his form is better than Varane's.
If Man United are going to be successful, and like I said, they're miles away from this, you got to stop pandering to your players. You just have to. Like, you do the work and show me that you deserve to start. That should be it. When João Cancelo was being a bit of a pain in the arse to Pep,
out he's gone.
See you later.
Quickly as
but
well.
Pep has earned that right because he's managed to succeed. But when Pep was failing at Man City in his first season, I know there were signs there, but they shipped out all of the fullbacks that they bought fullbacks. They bought a goalkeeper in his first season. He wasn't doing what he wanted, so they bought another one.
Sanya and Cliche. He played them inverted in the first season. It was a complete disaster. Gone out the football clubs. And those were two footballers from Arsenal that had some credit in the bank. People were like, they're quite good, aren't they? Well, only if you're playing like a system with proper fullbacks, not if you're asking them to invert into the centre of the pitch, which in those days, Scott, was still a kind of relatively fresh thing. People were like, well, what's Pep Guardiola doing in the Premier League with this? But you're right. I think Cancelo's a really good example.
Guardiola is one of the most successful managers of all time, and therefore you can't compare either of them.
He might end up, Scott, being the greatest manager of all time in the not-so-distant future. I know that is a contentious thing to say on a Man United podcast, but I think that Guardiola's had everything kind of given to him. So I think that's a positive thing for him, like from Barcelona to Bayern Munich to Manchester City. He's been involved in organisations that have got their stuff sorted out. I nearly used a swear word then, but they've got all their stuff together, in the background in terms of the football project. And that's helped him. He's never had to go to a smaller team. He's never had to be at an Aberdeen, has he? And kind of prove himself, and he has the Sir Alex reference there. But that's how it is, isn't it, in football? And I think that when you look at players, the managers do accumulate credit in the bank, but you must always remember that it's the manager that puts his neck on the block every single week. He picks that team, and it's his choice. And I think all managers should have carte blanche for that.
Talking about choices, Aaron Wan-Bissaka might have a choice to make. Never had a look in for England, and he's been offered a chance to play at the Africa Cup of Nations at the turn of the year. Not the only one. Obviously, Andre Onana's situation with Cameroon is also in the spotlight at the moment. He picked up an injury. I do believe. I think he's fine, isn't he, for this weekend?
Seems all right.
Which is a positive. And Sofiane Amrabat as well. That's another actually a different conversation. We've talked a lot about
done that. Whatever
he hasn't even done anything. So it might be a good thing that he's on loan. Who knows? But where do you stand on the Wan-Bissaka choice? Because I'm seeing a lot of selfish perspective, and there's nothing wrong with this as a fan. Selfish perspective, obviously, you don't want him to go because he's probably he's United's first choice right back at the moment. He's been injured. He's come back in and actually looked pretty good. And this would be another period of time where he's not in the first team. And with your Man United hat on, that's an issue. Potential problem. You have to rely on Diogo Dalot switching off at the back post every 5 minutes. Again,
Victor Lindelof at fullback.
But Wan-Bissaka, he's been offered this option. There's no indication whether he's going to take it or not. Where do you sit on it?
He's been offered it before as well, so it's not the first time. So this is not a new thing for him to think about. With my Man United red tinted glasses on, I would first and foremost like to say I want all of our players to retire from international football tomorrow, please, because it's such a complication at club level. Literally they go away, get injured, come back, and we have to deal with it, don't we? And that's something that goes on forever. I think with the Africa Cup of Nations, that there is always that kind of carrot there being dangled for a lot of our players who've got dual nationality, that they can go and do this and have an experience in international football. Let's be honest, Scott, can you blame them? Like, can you blame Aaron Wan-Bissaka? He's been in England squads in the past. He was in one England squad going back over time, and it hasn't worked out from an international level. And we know why that is, isn't it? Especially positionally in Gareth Southgate's squad. Now, I said to you before, I think he's still good enough to be in that squad, but you don't. And I actually think that most people probably don't. I think most people probably think he's not England material. So therefore, he should probably go and play for the country where he has the chance to represent Congo and be able to do that. What can we say about it? I just think that I still think that it's completely shambolic that the African Cup of Nations clashes with the wider football calendar as it does. People have said to me in the past, they went, well, Rob, you can't have that opinion, because I say it every season. They say you can't have that opinion because UEFA doesn't help the African Cup of Nations get around that. And do you know what? That's valid, Scott. It's a bit like the World Cup last year.
That's kind of where I sit on it.
Like FIFA going, oh, we're going to now have a World Cup suddenly at Christmas. Deal with it. And it's kind of what AFCON say. Probably go, well, it's not our fault, is it? Like, you won't help us. So what are we supposed to do? This is when we schedule this tournament. So I think with Aaron Wan-Bissaka, I don't want him to go. I'd rather he said no. But if he says yes, I think you have to pat him on the back and say, well, you've earned that spot. Like Man United in the last 12 months, he's earned recognition to be an international footballer, hasn't he? He doesn't need to sit at Carrington while everyone's away on an international break. He probably should be playing football at international level. I think he's good enough to do it. And I think he'd be a bit of a sensation for them. I think he'd go to that tournament and people would look at him a little bit differently again and go, oh, that's why Nana's done it. Nana's gone, oh, actually, I like this stage. I've gone to Man United. He hasn't thought, I won't play for a month. Actually, our second choice goalkeeper is not doing too badly at international level, is he? So he might get the opportunity, and that might be a different conversation to be had.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's up to you. Like, leave a comment where you sit on this Wan-Bissaka situation, and leave a comment on anything we've discussed already and anything we're going to discuss in the next few minutes as well. This is on Wan-Bissaka for me. I don't think he should be denied this chance. I think it's his choice to make, and you just have to live with it, really.
Good luck to him.
Yeah, good luck to him. If he wants to take it, if he doesn't want to take it, fine. No problem with that either. But we will wait and see. The tournament staged by Ivory Coast runs from January 13th to February 11th. No guarantee that obviously he'll be away for that long. It depends on when the team are eliminated, if he does go at all. But there's obviously a contract situation with Wan-Bissaka as well. I think he's out of contract end of this season. And United do have an option to extend it, but there's obviously I know he's been one of those players that has actually shown improvement. But going back to the conversation we had the other day, which we've got a lot of stick for, actually, in terms of selling players or offloading players when you have the chance.
A certain player.
We're not talking about money specifically here, but for me, if whoever the manager is, whoever the sporting director is, if they decide that Aaron Wan-Bissaka is not good enough and they decide to take a hit on him or offload him, as long as they've got a plan and they buy a certain profile of player moving forward, I mean, like that's an entirely different conversation.
And that's what they'll do. That's exactly. I think with the year trigger is that they'll give him that, but they are negotiating already. So there is this feeling that within Manchester United that they really like what he's done in the last year, and I think Ten Hag sees him as someone who is more reliable. Scott, like we just talked about Varane and breaking down. We know that Wan-Bissaka does give you physicality, does fight now, I think, a little bit better than he used to do in terms of his intelligence around the ball. And he does invert and does get on the outside. So he's kind of doing what the manager wants him to do. And of course, the reward for that will be a contract. But it happened with Dalot, isn't it? Dalot a year ago got his contract. And I was kind of going, oh, I don't like this. I don't trust Dalot. And yet 6 months on, we're now kind of back on that. Oh, well, is Dalot good enough tip? Might be the same for Aaron Wan-Bissaka.
Yeah, we'll wait to see how that one develops. Some good news, though.
Yay.
We'll look ahead to the Everton game and start the conversation with Luke Shaw, who is back in training. He's been back in training, I think, for a couple of weeks.
2 to 3 weeks.
But obviously, pictures have been released of Luke Shaw running and doing training things. Obviously, has a massive boost because I think Luke Shaw's absence has been pretty noticeable. I'm not even saying Luke Shaw, when he was fit, was perfect, but we know that he can be one of United's most effective players. We know that last season, when United didn't have a left centre-back option, Luke Shaw was moved into left centre-back. And we talked earlier in the show about why Maguire and Varane don't play together. It's probably because Luke Shaw's left-footed is very reductionist, but left-footed, Lisandro Martinez is left-footed. Ten Hag's talking about the passing angles and this kind of thing with a left-footed centre-back at left centre-back as opposed to a right-footed centre-back at left centre-back. And to me, I'm looking at Shaw now and I'm thinking, obviously the default thought there is that he goes to left-back and his overlapping is pretty strong. It might help Marcus Rashford find a little bit more space, this kind of thing. But do you think it's out of the question, Rob, that he is returning to LCB as they put it on games nowadays? Because I think Johnny Evans, I knew the latest on his injury actually, but we'll hear we'll hear from Ten Hag later today. We're recording, as I say, before his press conference. But Luke Shaw, Harry Maguire, do you think that's the centre-back axis that we could be seeing?
Potentially, and it could even be Luke Shaw and Victor Lindelof because we know the manager likes that pairing. So again, this is all about pairings. We've talked about Varane at the start of the show. I think with Luke Shaw, like you said, it's reductionist about left-footed side, playing that side of the park. We absolutely know that Dutch coaches are obsessed with that. They're absolutely obsessed with the passing angle from the left centre-back to the left-back or even into the left channel further up the pitch, because you're supposed to be able to put the ball on the outside and look up and be able to clip that ball into the wing area or even into a centre forward running off the back of a forward if there is a much higher line. So Luke Shaw absolutely can do that, can't he? We saw earlier in the season that Johnny Evans made that fantastic pass from left centre-back, didn't he, over the top to Bruno Fernandes that Bruno volleyed and finished beautifully. That's why you put someone who is technically can do that in that part of the park. So I think that Luke Shaw might come back and go straight in at left centre-back. I don't think it's ideal. I think two things is that at the start of the season, when we saw them in pre-season and going through to when Luke Shaw obviously got the injury, Luke Shaw's form hadn't been its best. And that was because he was carrying injuries. And when he carries injuries, his form does evaporate. A bit like Rashford in many ways. When they're carrying stuff, they're just never as good as they are when they're fully fit. I think the good thing is we've seen Luke Shaw in these training pictures, to me, is that he looks pretty solid and fit already. Like you could just see with Luke Shaw, looks a bit buff. He's been working out. He's been making sure that he's fit and ready to play. So I think that if you need a physical presence there who's got some speed and some pace at left centre-back, he's probably your best choice, isn't he?
I think he actually is.
As we stand today. The other point I wanted to make from last season is that when he filled in for Lisandro Martinez, he did it really well, but we really suffered at left back. Like when he wasn't at left back driving the ball, when it was Malacia, and there were games when Malacia played left back, Scott, and lost us the game because he made 1 or 2 or 3 or silly errors, didn't cover himself in glory, didn't cover Shaw's movement forward when he's progressing the ball. There were issues there. So I don't think it's a kind of perfect tactic, but I do
What
think
do you? Reguilon's now in the mix, right?
I just want Reguilon to go back to Spurs like quickly. I think the thing is again, what's my catchphrase, Scott? I say every year is that if a player can't help you, then just get rid of them. Like just go, And I look at Reguilon, and yes, he's a left back by trade. That's what it says on his passport. Left back footballer, Sergio Reguilon. But there's a reason why Tottenham didn't want him. Now, can Sergio Reguilon give you good minutes at left back? Of course he can. Do I want him to play left back? Absolutely not. Ever. Not at all. So, like you
But
just
have
said,
you not seen the Reguilon runs a lot, gives a lot of effort,
he
and
does.
therefore Man United should sign him permanently, crew.
Of course I have. And of
Yeah.
course he runs a lot. But do you know what he doesn't crucially do, Scott? He doesn't run back enough. Absolutely not. There was that game where he got pulled at half time. I think was it in the Champions League or whatever?
Wasn't
Where he
he
played.
ill that
He
night?
was ill. Poor boy. He was ill. I don't care.
It is hard to run when you're
He shouldn't
ill,
start
though,
then.
isn't it?
Like if you're not ready to run, like that, you can't blame him not running at Spurs for 2 years on him being ill. Like it's just the same thing. It's what I've observed at his former clubs. It's the reason why Real Madrid wanted him out the door, going back over time. So I'm not trying to make a hit at Sergio Reguilon. I actually think he's done all right in his minutes for Man United. It's just that, do I trust him? No, I trust him as much as I trust Dalot or Lindelof or players that I've spoken about in the past at Man United. It's the same kind of problem for me. And if he's on loan, yeah, please don't make that permanent. Like you just mentioned Amrabat. And I think the Amrabat thing is quite interesting because we needed a number 6, didn't we? And now our number 6 isn't in the team because he's injured, the Brazilian guy. Yeah, he's not in your team. And you're still not playing Amrabat at number 6. So it's quite interesting itself. And you just said that he's on loan. That isn't getting completed, is it? And I still think that Amrabat could be a big part of the season. I really do. I did that video, the Amrabat solution. I don't think he's been nearly as bad as some Man United fans have said. Like he's definitely not been the worst for me. And it just means that I think the style of player is not what you maybe need. But I think Reguilon, no. Do you know what? Let Reguilon go. Even maybe let Malacia go. Even then let Dalot or Lindelof go.
So what do you do if you play Luke Shaw at left centre back? Dalot.
I would probably say instinctually, if everyone is fit, Dalot, because Wan-Bissaka at right back. And I actually think in that back line now, it's so weird how time changes, isn't it? Because I criticised Aaron Wan-Bissaka so many times in the past about some of his things positionally. It's kind of the first choice for me in that whole back four. It's like, right, it's Wan-Bissaka at right back, and let's work it all the way back across. And now Luke Shaw's back. Probably Luke Shaw is the first choice. So I think that Shaw, Wan-Bissaka definitely have to start. And then you're thinking, right, Maguire, Lindelof, Varane, somewhere in that mix. And do I really even want to say Reguilon at left back? No, Reguilon on the bench maybe, because he can give you that wing back function. But I don't really play the wing back function, do they? It's not what they do. So Dalot, I think, has been better on the left side this year than on the right. He's a right-sided guy. That's what it says on his passport, right back. I think it's been poor.
On passports.
Well, in football passports, this is my imaginary world where you put your position on there as well. So I think that Dalot playing right back, where he's supposedly a right back, I don't think he's played very well, but other people have said he's been all right. And I'm like, well, I don't know. He's been better for me at left back, and he can do that. He can invert onto his right foot, come into the centre of the park. I think he's comfortable there. Reguilon can't do that, can he? You seen Reguilon invert? No, not happening. He's a wide boy. He wants to go on the outside, and he can cross the ball. But if you're only crossing the ball into one centre forward, Scott, and everyone else doesn't get that, not in your team because no one's crossed the ball for 6 years or something, that's a difficult thing then for a tactic to kind of produce, end result.
Football's back this weekend, Sunday. United play Everton away. They got a hard run of games coming up. Actually, I think they got three aways. Is it Everton, Galatasaray, Newcastle?
Crunch games in many ways.
United's form on the road is not exactly inspiring, is it? United have shown in Copenhagen that they can't really deal with atmosphere. United have shown in other away matches against teams with potentially even slightly stirring atmospheres that they don't do all that well. Although Rob's phone's going off
again. Sorry,
that's right.
it's Friday.
What was I going to say? Atmospheres, this kind of thing is a challenge for them. Everton's atmosphere is going to be pretty pumping because they are points deduction
So
FC.
pumping.
And although this is what I want to say: Man United are the form team in the Premier League.
We are
4 wins in their last 5. So is this the beginning of the ascension to second or third place in the Premier League, and therefore banning from the UEFA Champions League come the end of the season?
What if we win the title, Scott, and then like Nice win the title? That's a conversation.
Ban them both. I think they should both be banned.
So much sarcasm in our show today, but can you imagine that? Man United win the title.
I love sarcasm. I think
Nice win the title, then we get drawn in the same group next year in the Champions League, and 5,000 yards of column inches get written about how Sir Jim Ratcliffe controls football or something. I don't know. Look,
Rob, do you know? Right, I'll put this scenario to you.
Go on.
Right, this is a. I'm not considering Arsenal here, but maybe I'll say Arsenal draw at Brentford, Man City and Liverpool draw, and Man United win.
Could do. Yeah, that could.
They are then 5 points off the top of the league. Considering how much of a car crash this season has been, and
because Luke Shaw's back.
Yeah,
Luke Shaw's back. That's it. Title run.
I'm sure everybody. We are speaking in the theme of today's show. That is sarcasm, but I think that what I'm trying to stress there is you can watch United and want to tear your hair out and gouge your eyes out, but in the grand scheme of things, they ain't too far away. So if they can start to turn things around and get an idea of what they're doing, they're in the mix. They're still in the mix, and I'm not saying by any means that United are going to challenge or anything like that, but just looking at the numbers and looking at the points, they have only scored 13 goals in 12 games, so that might be a nice place to start.
And how are you in the mix by scoring 13 goals in 12 games? Like it's a miracle that United are technically in the mix, and we are in the mix, aren't we? So I think that's, they say the table doesn't lie, and the table doesn't lie, not at this stage anyway. And we're all in that situation here where we want Man United to play better, but as you recover players from injury, there is always that little incremental point, isn't there, Scott, that you just get a little bit better and you just get back to where you want to be. It's just like that last season. There's very little difference between Man United's start last year to this year, and kind of the feeling as well. Like I think we all felt in those early parts of the season last year that it felt like a disaster and about to burn away and we were in trouble. It's felt like that this year. We didn't want that deja vu feeling. But I do also think that you're all right. You're in a not bad position as long as you do push on. You just mentioned those 3 games there, Scott. Truth is, you've got to win them.
Chelsea on the horizon after that as well.
Exactly. You've got to go into these games, and that's why we said about Ten Hag at the start with his press conferences. Says the same thing. What does Eric Ten Hag say when they say, "Oh, it's an important game coming up"? He goes to his little notebook and he reads out, well, every game is important, and at Man United, we have to win every game. And he says that every single week. It's like pointless asking him that question. But he's right. That is the way it is. And I think that going into this part of the season, it is crucial now, Scott. I will say the run up to Christmas sets you up. Where you are on Christmas Day in the table is where the rest of the season pans out from. You can look at it from there and say, right, are we title challengers? Are we Champions League top 4 challengers? Where do we position ourselves? And I think last year at Man United, we were all shocked at the World Cup, weren't we? That United had kind of got back in the top 4 conversation when we were looking at it and going, well, are we even good enough? Like, where are we? I think last year he built his success around his 2 centre-backs. So that's something to think about. I think they played really well. I think David De Gea actually also his form improved around that period. So those 3 kept you afloat. Is that happening now? I'm not so sure. I think you're figuring out new problems with some of the same old stock. Do you get what I'm saying? So Luke Shaw coming back, though, Scott, is a massive part of that. Like if he comes back, plays really well at left centre-back, Harry Maguire's form continues at right centre-back, I think Onana's form has improved. I don't know what you think, Scott.
Yeah, he's been all right.
Loads better, hasn't he? He really has he's got better and looks more comfortable in his own skin in what he's doing in our goal, rather than us saying, oh, yeah, he's a sweeper keeper, but my God, he's not a good goalkeeper. He can't use his hands. Well, I think he's saved United plenty of points already this season with 2 or 3 crucial saves in really big games.
Yeah, so United play Everton. They're embarking on a a difficult run of games, but
they're all
It,
difficult.
it's hard to you can't just say clean slate because there's so many things hanging over United at the minute in terms of unhappy players and the ownership still isn't resolved.
Yeah.
We've passed the year anniversary of strategic alternatives now. Maybe there'll be an announcement hopefully next week and we can start to plan
Maybe.
ahead maybe, but this thing's happening in the background anyway. But this is not. There's so many issues to fix that this is not a quick fix. But what United have to do is just try and build. And if they can start scoring goals and taking some of their chances, it will really, really help. Because they will watch them get an early chance at Everton and miss it.
There's a basketball analogy about making sure you get good shots even if you don't score, right? And I think with Man United, the stats kind of suggest that United have had enough creativity to score more goals. Like, I don't think the creativity has been fantastic, but they have had opportunities. But I think it's fair to say that our forwards have missed those opportunities. And there's been all sorts going on, Scott, as well in the background. Also, we know like the issue with Anthony on the right-hand side and, his involvement in the team. And I think when you look at the equilibrium from last year, stuff that worked, Marcus Rashford's form is probably the key point in that. Because Marcus Rashford last year could do no wrong, and this year can do no right. His form is absolutely garbage. So you have to look at it like that and kind of look at those things and think, right, okay, if you can get Rashford scoring again, get more harmony on the front line, get Højlund more chances. Højlund's proved that if you get him tap-ins, he'll probably score. So you need to function that way. If United start scoring more goals, Scott, and are just steady at the back, you will win 85% of your games over the next 3, 4, 5 months. You just will, but it's on you. It's up to you to be able to make that happen. Luke Shaw's a massive part of that. People have said if Luke Shaw comes back, plays left back, that will instantaneously improve Rashford. Now, I'm not sure about that, but I do think that's a better pairing. I do think that Shaw overlapping Rashford gives Rashford that extra second to come in on the right foot and gives him extra space. So if you can manufacture that, Scott, in the weeks ahead and that becomes a tactic and you go back to it, we know it's worked in the past.
We'll see how it goes. Everton play Manchester United on Sunday, and then we enter no international break for 4 months. So it is fully club football mindset. And
yay,
let's just hope United can stop doing the meltdown stuff that makes everyone despair and curse every time they step on a football pitch. It's never that easy, though, is it?
It'd be nice to go to Everton and make a statement. Like Everton have had a bad week or so. Yeah, go there and rub salt in their wounds. Go there and say, well, we're better than you, so we're going to show that. But I do think Everton themselves have played much better football in the last few weeks. And again, Dominic Calvert-Lewin is back in the mix, isn't he? And I think that's a thing for them.
I can't say with any confidence that United will go and win this game, but fingers crossed, let's see how it goes. We'll wrap it there, I think. Any final thoughts, Rob?
No, just glad the Premier League is back. And it really is up to the players to prove themselves. I'm not interested in players that are not happy, Scott, like just said about Varane. I don't care who's unhappy. This is a squad game. You've got to get your team right. And the manager has to pick the right team. As we said, if you lose games, then we will question selections because that's what we do and that's what we have to do. But I'm with Erik ten Hag on it. Pick the team that you think is going to win the game. And I think he does it every week. I don't think he ever picks a team that he thinks might not win the game. He's convinced every week that the players he put out there are committed and are willing to run through brick walls for him. Maybe he just thinks that Raphael Varane isn't.
From Scott and Rob, this has been The Promised Land. Subscribe wherever you get your pods and watch us on YouTube as well. Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the notification bell so you never miss a show, and follow us on social media as we unpack whatever's going to happen over the next few days at @_Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok. I need to do more on there, really, because that's what
you need to do more for the show on there, Scott. Like, because obviously I'm so enamored about doing TikTok, not. So you need to carry the load there. Like you need to be my Maguire while I'm your Varane. So you need to do that for our TikTok content for the show.
Yeah, I did do one a few weeks ago, and it did pretty well actually. 40,000 views, 41,000 views. Just
we
a
go.
bit on the Glazers. Will they ever sell? And yes, we're still we're still in that moment. Anyway, also, I said TikTok, didn't I? _Rob_B on X and YouTube, and at Promisand on X or Twitter as well. And that's it. We'll be back soon to unpack whatever's happening. And have a great weekend, everyone. Hopefully, Man United can make it not worse. It's Thanksgiving weekend for any American listeners. Happy Thanksgiving, etc., etc. And yeah, see you soon, everyone, for another Promise. And maybe we'll keep up this level of sarcasm for future shows because I quite enjoyed it. But anyway, thanks, Rob. Thanks for listening or watching, everyone. See you soon. This has been the Promised Land podcast. See you soon.